preach gospel, plant sequoias, and practice resurrection. This week, we got some interesting, you asked for it.
Yeah.
Which strangely were similar, but Jeremy promises me that they didn't directly come from his sermon. So
no, and the timestamps on them suggest that they were both on the mind of people right after the sermon, because they were both from my church and both like right around noon. So,
we could say love makes you do crazy things.
Yeah, the sermon was all about love, but we got questions about aliens. So, but good questions nonetheless. Let's see. We'll start with this one. It's a long question. I'll just read the first part of it. But the rest of it is basically assuring me that this person is truly a Christian and just is thinking about this in scientific terms, in fact, and actually kind of is telling as to the question itself. It says this: do you think it's possible that God is an alien? I'm not crazy or conspiracy theorist, but I've thought about this for a long time, and I'm a faithful Christian and love Jesus, but the inner scientist in me can't help but want to unlock the whole mystery. It's the reason I say that's telling is because go on your YouTube and Google something like Richard Dawkins, Creation Aliens. Mm-hmm. And you'll find a few clips where he actually is pressed on the question of the origin of life. Because, so Richard Dawkins, a famous atheist, he is a zoologist, and his big issue with Christianity has to do with his theory of evolution. But he doesn't actually have a theory about the origin of the universe. He's interested in life itself. But the thing about evolution, regardless of what you think about the theory, is that the theory itself only deals with life once it gets started. Yep. And in the interview I saw with him, he was pressed on that question about, well, how did life begin in the first place? And sure enough, when he had to actually get down to what the origin of life might have been, he postulates that, well, it could have been an alien species that, sent off our genes in a space shuttle or designed. Even in one, he talks about an alien species self-preserving, and they sent their genes to another planet. The other, he goes further.
We call it the Superman theory.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly how Superman begins. And we are basically Superman in this analogy.
Which actually ties into the next question.
Well, hold on. The other one, which I just think is a great irony, is that he actually, he speculates that perhaps aliens designed us, like this is a full-on design. Mm-hmm. If you take that theory, what you end up with is a problem, because ultimately these are all questions about origins. Mm-hmm. And if you push back life to some other intelligent design, then you end up with the problem of an infinite regress, because it just begs the next question, mm-hmm. which is, well, who created the intelligent designers if it's not God himself? And this keeps pushing back to who created so-and-so and who created so-and-so. And at some point there has to be a first cause, an initial creation. And it can't be a cog in the wheel that it itself creates. This precludes the possibility that anything that is made of or consists of physical matter could have been that original cause, the first cause, because matter is by nature contingent. Everything material depends on something else for its existence. No matter is self-existent. And there has to be something that is outside of this interdependent system to have given rise to the system. Mm-hmm. And, the classical explanation for this is that something was not a thing, but a someone, in fact. and it was God, and it wasn't just a force or a power because of the intricacies and the design that's so evident in the universe. Because if it were just a power, imagine, like a grenade or dynamite exploding. Explosions and forces of unintended power don't give rise to order. And so, the explanation is, well, there is in the origin of all things, not just power, not just a big bang, as it were, but a big banger. Someone who actually gave rise to this with intention, with purpose. And actually, this is how the ancient world understood the cause of all things. Or they had, the theory of causes. There were 4 causes, and first cause, final cause. So it's not just how it got started, but to what end, and then formal, the thing that makes it the thing that it is. So if it's, a marble that's been carved into a statue is not just a shape, it's a particular thing, the form. And then the efficient cause is the agent that, the agent that impresses on the thing to give rise to it. So this is the, and material cause was the other one. So like if the statue example, the marble itself that is the substance. But there has to be something outside of all material causes to give that, to have become the source of all of them, because none of them can become the source of themselves.
Yeah, I find it's interesting that the question is couched in as a scientist.
Yeah.
Because when you get to cosmology, which is a science, it always will stretch the limits of science, because you aren't looking at something that really is repeatable at all. The Big Bang, you're not expecting to repeat itself, and it actually can't, because of how small the odds are that this massive explosion from singularity to what we have in an ever-expanding universe, that could ever happen again is completely unexpected. Yeah. And so it will always stretch science to start looking at cosmology, which is the study of origins. Yeah. I will also say, because of that, it's interesting that this question, again, points to aliens and combines them with science, because I would say it leans more towards mythology than actual science, 100%. Because there isn't an evidence for aliens at all. And so if you're listening to this, I think it's important that we recognize that the image we have about aliens needs to get placed alongside the gods of Olympus and other mythologies that have been created by our human understanding of what could be. And so aliens, I would say, don't belong in the realm of science as much as they belong in the realm of stories we've told ourselves. Yeah.
2 points in response. It is interesting that the scientific method, what it actually does in the, if you take the classical categories of causation, formal, final, material, and efficient. These are the technical terms for them. What science does is it brackets out formal and final cause, because those are metaphysical categories. The form of something, to call a statue, to distinguish a statue from a piece of marble, that requires your mind. There's no material difference. It's an actual aesthetic difference. And this is a metaphysical category. And then final cause has to do with intentionality. It is the purpose for which something exists. Science actually has to bracket those out per its method's necessities. And this is not to denigrate science. It's just to understand its limitations.
Alongside.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So it is interesting that from a scientific perspective, when the scientific method becomes a doctrine rather than a method, it actually can frame out our vision of reality, so that we stop seeing aesthetic forms properly and the intentionality behind things that so evidently demonstrate themselves, like in just the design and the beauty and the intention of creation, that, you know, Paul says that this is what many will, it's a truth that we suppress because it's so evident, it's so obvious. You really have to try hard to look out, you know, at creation and just conclude, oh, it's just all one long series of accidents.
Yeah. And we are confronted by something that can't fit into a test tube.
Yeah.
Because the Big
right.
Banger, as God,
maybe got to find a different phrase
cannot be fit into a test tube.
Yeah.
And we're called to do something that's beyond science, which is worship.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's transition.
Well, one more thing about the mythology point that you made is, the way I would describe it is not just aliens are mythology, but our scientific theory, if it is taken as absolute, it becomes a mythology. And what I mean is, you can't base all an explanation of reality just on, you know, a theory of the Big Bang and what follows from that. What you end up with is a theory that can't explain the origin of human consciousness ultimately, and the metaphysical participation of the human experience in all of life, because clearly the human experience is immersed in something that's both physical and metaphysical. Like for example, the picture that we have in our mind's eye, that where do you locate that picture in the brain? If I say, think of a pink elephant. Okay, you can imagine that in your mind. Well, where does that exactly exist in the molecules in your brain? It doesn't. Your mind is metaphysical. So, and I didn't come up with this, but it's the one thing that, well, I'll just say the thing that ancient mythologies have in common with modern mythologies, and this is actually really critical. If you understand ancient myths, you'll see the parallel. In ancient myths, God didn't create nature. Nature created the gods. There is, in all ancient mythologies, the emergence of gods that overcome these kind of impersonal voids or forces or black, you know, kind of darkness, but this overcoming of these creatures, you know, these nature creatures.
Yeah, very tied to earth.
Yeah, and what you have in modern mythologies is just the same, where you have nature creating humans that overcome nature. You know, for the ancients, it's nature created the gods, and the gods overcome nature. For us, we've just become the gods in the mythology. We've just entered that different placeholder, and we're those creatures that somehow exert our will over nature, so that we have now this modern God complex.
One might say we've become the Nephilim.
Well, and that leads to the second question.
And as you're gearing up for that, I do find it so fascinating that Richard Dawkins, even Stephen Hawkins, both believed in aliens.
Interesting.
And thought their existence might help us understand the questions that point us towards God.
Yeah.
It's this attempt to do just about anything.
Let me ask you this.
Yeah.
Say we get proof of aliens. I mean, I did say to the church the other day, I believed in the possibility of aliens until my government started telling me that they existed. So, but would that mess with your faith? Because I know this is a question a lot of people have.
I don't. It wouldn't mess with my faith. I don't believe in aliens.
Yeah. Okay.
And it part
Do you
of
believe
what
any life?
I believe
forms?
I believe the potential of biological life. When I think of an alien form, I think of something that is in some ways comparable to a soulish being, which we are. And I think the incarnation of Jesus is very unique to us. That God, it's so extraordinary that God became a man. I don't think he's doing that for other species.
Yeah.
And so the incarnation does make me...
Well, maybe all these other species aren't sinners like us.
Well,
maybe we're the worst creatures in the universe.
I think of Chronicles of Narnia and how Lewis creates this he didn't see it as an allegory as much as he kind of described his way out of it. But I don't see Jesus showing up to other forms in the same way.
Well, it wouldn't be Jesus, surely, because Jesus is a very particular historical person of the Son of God incarnate. Yeah,
which is what makes me believe, and I'll say believe. It's a faith that there aren't other soulish beings.
I would say
or
it wouldn't cause me a crisis of faith. Now, if there were aliens flew here and that would cause a lot of questions for sure. But yeah, I could imagine that God in his delight to create others and otherness.
Yeah, I would
creating them, other life forms.
Yeah, I mean, I as another animal species. Yeah. I could see that. And
I would say I don't buy any theory of emergence. In other words, I don't think that the physical, chemistry of the universe can give rise naturally to biochemistry. I don't think I agree. I haven't heard a plausible theory. I haven't read a plausible theory that makes that jump. The jump from non-life to life, and then the jump from single-celled organism to multi-celled organism.
Completely agree.
It's mathematically just seems absolutely absurd to think that. So, all right, we need to keep moving.
Superman.
Who were the Nephilim? Were they children born as descendants of Sethite fathers and Canaanite mothers? And did demons take on human form to impregnate human women? Is that why they were so violent? Just curious. And then she sent another email. Were the children born of women from the Seth line with fathers from the line of Seth? Did demons take on the human form to create these violent giants? So let me just read real quick the passage where this comes from, and then I'll give a few possibilities the way I think about it. Okay. So it says this. So the purpose of Genesis 1 through 11, just to put it in context, is, I think it was Gordon Wenham, the Old Testament scholar, who said Genesis 1 through 11 is a tract for the times. So think of a gospel tract as something you hand out to, people to share their gospel. And what he's talking about is when you read Genesis 1 through 11, what you'll get is a lot of similarities with other mythologies, other primordial histories, prehistories. So these are histories that have come down through oral tradition. And so for some people that causes a lot of questions or concerns. Well, why is there some parallels? Well, the important thing is, first of all, to recognize, why are all these other histories talking about flood accounts and so on? Well, the obvious answer is because there was a flood, But what's important is not just the continuity, but the discontinuities. And when you actually read side by side a lot of the parallel origin stories and stories of the flood and stories of the Tower of Babel and so on, what is different about Scripture's account is, in some ways, what it's trying to tell us. And by the time you get to Genesis 6, what God is doing is giving his reason for the flood, which wasn't arbitrary. It follows a straight line from the purpose for which he created human beings, created us in his image, so that by the time you get to Genesis 6, you see basically the negative counterpart to the original vision. And the original vision was an image-bearing family, right? So the image of God is, we're each created in the image of God, but the picture painted in Genesis 1 of let us make mankind in our image, in the image of God, he created them, male and female, he created them, and then he blessed them. First word ever spoken to human beings was blessing, and said, be fruitful and multiply. All of that is contained in the image of God. So think of the image of God as, one, a family portrait, but also a motion picture. It's a whole dynamic of life and relationship. And it was all intended to be this family that shared dominion over all living things, over creation essentially, but over all living things in particular, it says in Genesis 1. So that by the time you get to Genesis 6, what the author is trying to demonstrate is this is the consequences of sin wreaking havoc in the world. And remember, sin began when it started with the woman who took what was not hers. It was God's. God had designated the tree, which maybe one day we'll talk about that. And then gave to her spineless husband, and he ate. And we're the author of Genesis drawing a connection with the word took, and now listen to what's being taken and then how it leads to the Nephilim. When man began to multiply on the face of the land, and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of man were attractive, and they took as they chose their wives. Then the Lord said, my spirit shall not abide in man forever, for he is flesh, and his days shall be 120 years. So in other words, God's putting a limit on human life, and this is an act of mercy, because, before this, these lifespans are like 1,000 years almost, and now he's having to put a limit on it, because with the long lifespans, the expansion of evils. Imagine if Hitler lives for 1,000 years. That's the idea. And then it says this, the Nephilim were on earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God came into the daughters of man, and they were born to them. These were the mighty men who were of old, the men of renown. And then right after that it says this, the Lord saw the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intention of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. That's, talk about redundancy. It's really emphasizing that that this is, and then it says God, this grieves God to his heart, and it's that leads to the flood. Now, the specific questions were about these sons of God, are these from Seth's line? Because Seth was the good one, whereas Cain was the bad one, the two sons of Adam and Eve, the living son after Cain killed Abel and so on, and Cain is sin away. I would say a definitive no to trying to trace that out, because then first of all, but there's no, I don't think, biblical evidence for that. But what I find is, and I'm familiar with that way of reading it, is one, it's a very kind of naturalistic reading of this text that's wanting to kind of avoid some of the weird implications you might get from what it says. But there's no evidence that you had these two distinct lines from good people and bad people. And when you start doing that with Genesis, as it has happened a lot, you end up with a weird vision of the human race, and you can start to see people as good people, bad people. Slavery was justified by doing this with Noah's sons, the Ham and Cain and Japheth. And so we want to avoid that way of thinking. Don't impose on the text some theory that to demand an answer that maybe the text just
got a bad
open.
Seed.
Yeah.
As they say.
Yeah, just a bad seed. There's some bad seeds out there, and thankfully we're Sethites over here. So I don't think that's the case. And then as far as the Nephilim go, first of all, it says in Genesis specifically, they were in the world in those days, but also after. And these weren't a unique category of humans or beings. to just the time before the flood, because they show up again in the book of Numbers. The Nephilim are mentioned in the book of Numbers. I can't remember exactly where, but you can track that down.
Yeah.
So there's a couple options. One is Nephilim refers to a specific kind of quality of giant figure, but not just that. By the time you get to Genesis 6, again, the point is to show how far we've fallen from our humanness. And Nephilim becomes kind of an idiom, I think, for like a beast-like character that has almost possessed human beings. I mean, that's what happens by the time you get to the diagnosis that the Lord saw the wickedness of man, and it wasn't just some of man. Well, It wasn't just the Sethites, but all mankind was great in the earth, and every intention of thoughts always evil continually. So I think this is just a way of painting a picture using kind of those idioms of the time to show that humans have become like beasts, and that, you know, maybe there were in terms of the sons of God and the daughters of men. So, go ahead.
Well, let me jump in, because I read it similarly. I think rather than beast-like, though, I think more in terms of what mythology would call the Titans, and we've kind of co-opted that language. So the Titans in mythology were these kind of primordial gods, and you talked about that, that came from the earth. Like basically the earth and sky had kids, and you get these 12 Titans that are these earthy powers that then produce other gods like Zeus, who we would have thought of as being the most powerful of all gods. These are actually kind of these products of the Titans. We've actually co-opted that language into our modern mythology as titans of industry. And these titans of industry are larger than life. I mean, think of Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, these people that are outsized in their influence and powerful that we treat like gods. And they've created their own essentially their own royalty on earth now. And if they get married, we all watch. We're all pretty impressed. Did you know Jeff Bezos spent $6 million on flowers at his wedding?
For real?
He did.
Actually?
We know that because these are the titans of industry. And I think the Nephilim, which is a word that means the fallen ones, exemplify all the fallen glory. And so, as you said, by the time we get to Genesis 6, the fall isn't something that is repented of or grieved anymore. It's something that is exalted in, and people are pretty impressed by what they've created here on earth. And these are the ones, the guys that represent all that you can be in the fall. And I think that's why later on, even after the flood, you get it, because again, people are creating themselves as the titans, as the greatest glory the fall has to offer. And so not these spiritually outsized beings as much as these are the ones that are all the glory of humanity. And with a complete disregard for God. And then that is what the fallen ones means. And in that phrase, sons of God, don't think like the eternal Son of God, but there are different ways the Bible uses the term. Job 1 and 2. Job 1, now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came among them. And then Job 2, again, there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves. And so there are, sometimes it's used to describe, well, really you don't get humans described as sons of God until Luke actually calls Adam a son of God. But that is him reading his Christology into Adam. But there are different theories about what this means, and sons of God can refer to like not divine beings in the sense of gods, but like angelic beings. And so that's where the question of, are these like demons, and are they intermarrying with humans? And I would just say to that, I'm not really sure what's going on in
in Genesis 6. I do think it probably has to do with a kind of polemic against the ancient mythologies of the time, where there would be, if anything, if any kind of angelic figure or divine figure in the ancient literature would have elevated gods above human beings, this does the exact opposite. That it takes that vision of these other divine or angelic figures, and it shows a major departure from the highest creature in the echelon, which is the image of God, which is human beings made in the image. This has become so far from the image. And, so it could have had to do with just addressing the culture, because remember when those Hebrew slaves who had been liberated from Egypt, been enculturated and indoctrinated in the pantheon of the Egyptian gods, and were going into the Canaanite world of the Mesopotamian gods. One of the things that they need is a clear differentiation between, those depictions of gods and which were decidedly above and superior to humans. And God is actually relativizing all of that to say, you are the highest creature in all creation. As David says in Psalm 8, you have made us just a little lower than gods, Elohim. So you can translate that, because Elohim in Hebrew is a plural for it's the plural form of all nouns. But so when you read Elohim, sometimes it refers to God, because it's the Hebrew's way of saying that all our conceptions of God is really just one. A beautiful thing that Hebrew does in Genesis 1:1, it uses Elohim, the plural noun, but then it uses the Hebrew verb is in the singular. So it's saying both that there's only one God, but you see that in the Hebrew verb, but this idea of gods really gets spelled out in the "let us make them in our image," which is, we know now, is a Trinitarian vision that we have to read back into the past. But David says, you have made us a little lower than God or gods, and crowned man. What is man, that you're mindful of him? The Son of Man, that you care for him? The Son of Man, above these sons of God, that you care for him. You've made him a little lower than God, and crowned him with dominion, and given him dominion over the work. Crowned him with glory, given him dominion over the works of your hands. So again, I think what this represents is a departure from the image, and a polemic perhaps against the zeitgeist of that day, and an elevation of the human.
I agree. I think
image.
I would say the safest way to read it is this outsized, out of control influence of sort of man gone wild.
Yeah, there you go.
And which
Son's gone wild.
Son's gone wild, and points to humanity not recognizing what God has not forgotten. Yeah. Not recognizing even now how powerful we are and we're created to be. Yeah. And walking around, silly example, but I think of how, like, Harry Potter, you're introduced to him in this little cubby beneath the stairs, and he doesn't recognize he actually has power. In some way that's kind of allegorical in terms of us as sons of God, that we are people with incredible power, created. What C.S. Lewis would say: if we saw one another, we bow down and worship. We would bow down and worship. True. And so, I think we actually don't see ourselves.
That's right,
as brilliantly as we truly are.
Yeah, and that is the Christian story really expects us to believe that this is actually the result, like the sinful world. It's a result of human dominion. Yeah. That we really were given dominion over all living things. So when our dominion is disordered, even David says, Psalm 8, you give us dominion over the works of your hands. When our dominion gets disordered, it's the fall of the universe. I mean, this is a cosmic a cosmic, because we are made in God's image. And so you're right. I think we underappreciate that.
So this is going to segue.
Okay, good. It's time to transition.
So transitioning from aliens.
Yeah.
And
not that far though.
Nephilim into our sermons. We just wrapped up the 7th letter Jesus wrote to churches in Asia, the church of Laodicea. And I'm calling this the tale of two stories because there are two different stories that are told in this that you will often hear referred to separately, depending on whether the pastor wants to lean into people feeling like God's just about to reject them. Mm-hmm. That's the first story you will hear. And then the second story is a tender story of reconciliation. And this letter brings those both together. Laodicea is the second church that gets no commendation. And this is the way it starts. I want to vomit you out of my mouth. When I was talking in the sermon, I said, this sort of has the vibes of Sandlot, where you have both teams that are saying the worst thing they possibly can think to the other team, so they can psych them out. Oh yeah, like, you make me want to vomit.
Yeah, gotcha.
And that's kind of what it sounds like. After Jesus introduces himself, he says, I know your works, you're neither hot nor cold. Would that you were either cold or hot, because you are lukewarm and neither hot nor cold. I will spit you out of my mouth. And so the way this is oftentimes told is, you either should be really hot, or strangely, positively, you should just be super cold, which people indicate as being zealous for God or not interested in God at all. But because you're kind of wishy-washy, I'm going to spew you out of my mouth.
Is that how you read it?
That's the way I grew up.
Yeah.
That's not the way I read it. That's the way I grew up. So the way it should be read, is
not just how you read it, but how it should be, people.
The only way that they would have read it.
Okay, let's hear it.
Laodicea is in the Lycus Valley, and it's positioned as a sister city to two other cities, Hierapolis and Colossae. And you can think of this as like the Tri-Cities in Washington, where you have Kennewick, Pasco, Richland, that are three separate cities, but they're all grouped together in this Tri-Cities region. And that's exactly what happened in the Lycus Valley. We know this scripturally because in Paul's letter to the church of Colossae, he references the church of Laodicea 5 times, including saying, once you're done with this letter, send it over to Laodicea, and they're going to send their letter to you. And so we never got that one, did we? You quite literally have read each other's mail, which you only do if you're quite close. Now, they were close geographically, but in terms of their geological features, very different. Colossae, closest to the mountains, had fresh streams, and so were known for their refreshing cold water that they got from the mountains. Just down from Laodicea, you have Hierapolis, that is furthest down the valley, widely known for their hot springs, which people would come and bathe in for medicinal benefit. And Laodicea had no fresh water source. They had no natural water source, and so they used these aqueducts to pipe in water that by the time it got to them was disgusting and lukewarm. And so there's no question how they would have read this. I either wish you were hot or cold, but since you're lukewarm, I want to spew you out of my mouth.
But what would hot and cold have meant, and lukewarm have meant?
So lukewarm, that's perfect question. So Hippocrates, the father of modern medicine, in 5th and 4th century BC, had already talked about lukewarm water being the way that you induce vomiting. And so it was actually medicinal purpose.
My wife likes lukewarm water.
And as it kind of, you get the Hellenist period, how they treat warm water, and they say add a little salt. But as it progresses, lukewarm water is actually seen as what's called an emetic, which is something that induces vomiting.
Oh, wow.
And so the way they would have received it isn't as Jesus going, you make me want to vomit. It actually is, this is what the doctor orders, is that there's a poison in you that needs to be spewed out.
Interesting.
So rather than saying, you're bad, he's saying, actually, vomiting needs to be induced because there is a poison within the system of your church that needs to be vomited out.
But he's saying he will vomit.
Yeah.
If they're not hot or cold.
Yes, correct.
So
because he goes...
Because they're a poison.
Yeah.
And he's saying,
because he goes right into...
Is there a positive example, or does the analogy not go that far with the other two cities? I'm just wondering what hot or cold would have meant. Or is he just using this as a way of saying, you, Laodicea, are like this water in your midst?
Yeah. So I think the positive part about the vomiting is that it's actually... I started with the story.
Yeah.
I wasn't going to get into it in the podcast because...
Well, I'm curious.
Well, quite emotional to me. I started talking about how
story.
there's different forms of vomiting, and so I started the podcast talking about my little girl Evangeline.
Or the sermon.
Sorry, thank you. The sermon talking about my little girl Evangeline, who last year, just about exactly a year ago, she was playing on a play set, fell, and was unconscious for quite a bit of time. And we had to take her to Marybridge Hospital for additional tests. Weren't able to do all those tests because she refused to sedate with all the sedatives. And so we went home Friday night, same day as she became unconscious. Went home without knowing really what was going on in her little head. We were given this list of things to look out for. You know, if she becomes unconscious again, if she's dizzy, if she's disoriented, if she's vomiting, these might be indicators that something actually more is going on. And so we wake up Saturday, and the whole day are watching to see, is she dizzy? Is she disoriented? Is she confused? And then late in the afternoon, she starts vomiting. And this is the telltale sign that something's wrong in her brain, that there was some real damage that happened. And so get in the car, and we're traveling to Tacoma. And this is the moment that it's not just, is something wrong? It's how much longer do we have with Evie? Because they said, if she starts showing one of these signs, this is serious. So we're driving to Tacoma, just crying, loving her. And we pass Port Orchard, get a call from Caleb, who's with our other two. And he says, hey, Elliot just started throwing up. And we were ecstatic.
Thank God. Yeah, thank God, yeah.
Found out all the other kids at the party that Evie had been at when she fell were throwing up. There was like 10 kids throwing up from this party.
Oh, wow.
And it made us so happy.
Yeah, wow.
And we were happy because, and this is the way I transitioned in the sermon, was I've shared this story to tell you that there's different forms of vomiting.
Yeah.
Vomiting communicates different things. And what this vomiting communicated is that there is a positive vomiting, which the body does to expel a poison. So when you have food poisoning and you throw up, you feel better because the body's getting out a toxin in your system. Now, when you throw up because you have a head injury, that's not productive at all. It's because something's gone wrong in your brain. Because it's not communicating what it should be communicating. And so this is productive vomiting that Jesus is talking about. It's getting out of the system a poison that needs to be removed.
In a way, him telling them to repent, he's telling them to vomit so he doesn't have to vomit them out.
Absolutely. And he goes on to diagnose what the issue is.
He tells specifically,
Specifically what the issue is. And this is again, rich cultural context. You say, I am rich, I have prospered, and I need nothing. Now, Laodicea, you would think because they're in this valley where they're not getting any fresh water and the water tastes like gross minerals that are making people vomit, you would think that it wouldn't be a prosperous place. Well, Laodicea is wealthy and known for three things. The first is banks. They're incredibly prosperous. You can think I compared it to the Bellevue of Washington, where they're not making money. Money lives there. And so banking, medicine. So this eye salve that they make, which he later addresses, and then their textile industry, which later he talks about nakedness. So each of these he brings. They're known for these things, which has made them incredibly wealthy. So wealthy, and this is the story that everyone in the ancient world would know. They are so wealthy that when an earthquake in 60 or 61 AD hits the Lycus Valley and levels much of Laodicea, Rome sends an invoice saying, we're going to send money and help you rebuild. And Laodicea rejects the offer of money because they're so wealthy. They don't want to be reliant on Rome, and they can rebuild themselves.
It's pretty big.
You say, I am rich and I have prospered and I need nothing.
Oh, wow. Wow. And this was written after that.
This was written a couple decades.
Wow. That's really
after that. And this is how it goes on. Jesus, not realizing that you are wretched, pitiable, poor, blind, and naked. So your view of yourself is incorrect. Your view of yourself of independence and self-reliance it's a poison in your system that needs to get vomited out. That's what he's telling.
That is so intense.
It's so intense. Yeah. And that's what he's telling the church of Laodicea. Everybody loves you. You don't go to anyone for help. Everyone comes to you for help. But this is created in your view of yourself an independence and a self-reliance that is keeping you from a relationship with God.
Man.
It's disgusting to me, and that needs to get vomited out.
Wow.
It is wretched, pitiable, poor, naked, and blind. And each one of those, poor, they're known for their banks. Naked, they're known for their textile industry. And blind, they're known for their eye salve, where people can come actually and get help with their eyes. And so Jesus says that needs to get vomited out. And I counsel
your reliance on it.
Your view of you've got it made. The comfort you have because of these things. I counsel you to buy from me gold refined in the fire.
Wow.
So that you might be rich.
Wow.
White garments that you might be clothed. From the shame of your nakedness. Salve to anoint your eyes that you may see. Each one of these things that relies in, he's giving a comparative to what he offers. And he says all that you've relied on needs to get vomited out so you can choose me.
Wow.
This is seen by them, I'm sure, as absolute rejection. Think of the rich young man that comes to Jesus and he's like, I've tried it all. What am I still lacking? And Jesus says, this is what you're lacking. Giving up everything. Yeah. And in these 3 verses, Jesus names everything. Everything that their identity is built on. And he says, all that needs to be given up. So that you can have me, which seems to them like utter rejection. Now, the turn in the story is Jesus follows that up. You make me want to vomit, right? That's the way we'd read it. He follows that up by saying the most tender word he gives to any of the churches, which is this. Those whom I love, I reprove and discipline. And so this turn from one story to the other story he's about to tell is this. I love you so much. He just said, basically, you got to throw up. You're going to be the thing that gets thrown up. And then he says to them, man, I love you so much. And that is why I'm dragging this into the light. And so he tells this story, which is a starkly different image than we're left with. The image we're left with in the first story makes us feel like we're the thing he's wanting to reject. But get where he goes with this second image. Behold, I stand at the door and knock. if anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come to him. I will come into him and eat with him. And he with me. And so
From
the first image,
eating.
the first image makes us feel like we're the ones getting rejected. And the second image, Jesus is saying, the way you've acted, I'm actually the one that's been rejected. The poison needs to get rejected from your system so I can be accepted.
Yeah.
Which is so important for these two stories to get shared together. Is oftentimes when Jesus brings something into the light, which is what the Spirit says to the church, and what the Spirit says to the church is a word of conviction, conviction of sin, righteousness, and judgment. And so he's bringing this to the light. And when something is brought into the light in our lives, we feel, if this is known to God and other people, there's no way I would be accepted. There's no way I would be loved. And that's why it's so important that the turn from what the Spirit's saying to the church, there's a poison in you that needs to be vomited out. That turn of, and I love you, and I'm actually the one waiting to be let in.
Yeah.
And so it's this, man.
And the beautiful, there's a play on the inside, outside, the spatial dimension. What's in you needs to be purged. So he literally says, so that I can come into you and eat with you. So get what's in your gut out, and I'll bring you real food. I'll bring you the bread of life. Yeah.
Which I actually tied into this sermon series we're going to be starting both of our churches next week, and you'll get
beautiful
a foretaste Ash Wednesday.
Hopefully no vomit left on it.
I will talk a little bit about why we hunger. But in hunger for God, we're bringing our own hungers to the table. We're bringing what we have, and Jesus is ultimately replacing it with himself. And that's exactly what he does here. He goes, these things that you thought were your riches, these things that you thought were your healing, these things that you thought clothed you, he goes, that's really me, and I'm waiting. But the cool thing is, he's not just knocking; he's calling. Which is, I said, it's like the lover in all the stories. It's like Romeo calling out to Juliet. It's like whatever his face is calling out to Rapunzel. It is all the love stories of let me in. It's Song of Solomon. Let me in.
That's right.
And that's Jesus. Actually, the cross reference in Scripture really for this image is Song of Solomon. Is the lover that stands outside the door wanting to be let in. And that's who Jesus is. He's ultimately saying, will you let me in a hilarious image, which we all can relate with. Now, if any of us modern day people who don't do anything without texting or pre-planning hear a knock on the door, we panic. This knock on the door is even worse, because this is what we're meant to imagine. Now imagine this. You're naked.
You're pitiable, you're poor, you're blind, bumping around the house.
You're blind. And so you are naked in your house, so vulnerable, and you hear a knock on the door, and Jesus isn't just taking no for an answer. He's calling out. I know you're in there. Let me in. And so it really is a humorous image that there's no more exposed, vulnerable, awkward place we can possibly be in than poor. Maybe having a house we're not proud of. It's a house of shame we've built just to keep him out. And we're blind, meaning we don't really know who's at the door. We can't peek out the blinds and check it out. We're naked. And then Jesus comes knocking at the door.
But the question is, are you hungry? Right? Because you smell that bread of life outside.
Because he wants to come in, and not just come in, to come in and eat with you. And his offer is way better than you can ever ask or imagine. And that's how the story ends. Because the one who conquers, and how do you conquer? Open the door.
Open the door.
That's how you conquer. And the one who opens the door, he will grant with him to sit with him on the throne, as I also conquered and sat down with my Father on the throne. The image here I didn't realize until studying for this letter, it has precedence. There's actually one of the Caesars, I think it was Caesar Augustus, there's a coin where there's actually a double throne where he shows him and his best bud that he grew up with making room on his throne for this other guy to sit on that throne, naming him as his successor.
Oh, interesting.
And so when we read that we're co-heirs with Christ, that we are meant to climb up on the throne with him, that Jesus literally here is saying, I'm sliding over and I'm making room. There was actually precedence for that. And it means all we could imagine it meaning, which means the kingdom, the glory, the power are ours. And all we need to do, us pitiable, wretched, poor, naked, blind people, is just to open the door. And so that's
good. I love that the connection to the rich young ruler and Jesus' perspective on his riches was that one thing you lack, right?
Yeah,
it's in your abundance that you're actually lacking, because it's the one thing that's keeping you from me. I mean, because in essence, it was the one thing keeping him from receiving everything, which was Jesus. He walked away sad because he had many possessions.
Yeah.
You know, so in the same way, you know, that, and this is clearly, I think, a temptation and struggle for everyone in a culture like ours. Very, not only relatively wealthy, but surrounded by the illusion that wealth and prosperity and possessions actually represent a significant and weighty abundance. But really, it all amounts to lack in the end, if that's where we find our reliance and that's where we direct our pursuits.
Yeah, I did not talk about the story of the Good Samaritan, but if I had time, I would have, because the story of the Good Samaritan is, I would say, the violent version of the rich young ruler story.
Oh, yeah.
Because when we read stories in the Bible, oftentimes we're reading ourselves into the wrong character. And in the story of the Good Samaritan, the character that the listeners who are teachers of the law, good Jews, are listening to that story, the character that they would have been seeing through the eyes of is not the Good Samaritan. A good Jew would...
They don't want to be a Samaritan.
They don't want to be a Samaritan. And so we call it the Good Samaritan story and read ourselves into...
the wrong character.
The wrong character. Yeah. Those listening, what character are they in this story?
They're the ones who passed by.
They're the ones beaten up.
Oh, I see. So they're playing the victim, you're saying.
So this is the way the story should be read.
And
this is what I'm saying.
That's
the story
interesting. Yeah,
you should read when you read the Good Samaritan story.
Who's helping you?
Who's helping you?
Yeah.
Listen to this. This is the way the Good Samaritan story should be read. You're whistling, you're walking along, you get jumped within inches of your life. You've been beat up so badly, you are immobile, paralyzed, lying on the ground. You can't do anything. And then walking by are all the people from your church. And they're disgusted by you. And then the person that walks by is the person that you have been disgusted by your whole life. And they're the one that cares for you. And so when I hear pitiable, poor, naked, blind, that is the Good Samaritan story, where we thought of ourselves in one way, and now all we can do is lay immobile, watching what transpires before us. And that's the true story of the Good Samaritan.
And that makes I love that reading, because it makes more sense of the way Jesus turns the question that elicits the parable on its head. Remember how it starts. You know, what do I do to inherit eternal life? You know the commandments, this, that, the other. Love your neighbor as yourself. Who's my neighbor? And then he tells the story, and then he concludes the parable with just the opposite question. Who became a neighbor to the man in the ditch? Now you have to say, I was the one who received help from the Samaritan.
Yeah.
Which, regardless of whether you read that or not, the Samaritan does become the exemplar in the story, and the story becomes about not who is my neighbor, but who's willing to make neighbors. And in this case, then, who's willing to be made a neighbor by those who be helped by someone they didn't want help from? And that's precisely where Jesus becomes the Samaritan as well, because they didn't want help like that. They wanted help like the dominant king. They didn't want forgiveness of sins. They wanted dominance over Rome.
Yeah, and what Jesus is doing more often than not is just revealing that we aren't the righteous people that we think we are.
Yeah.
You could do a whole sermon series, which maybe we will, on misreadings. I mean, I think that is one of the most profound misreadings, this story of the Good Samaritan, that we read ourselves into as the hero. We're not the hero of that story. Every character in that story that we would read ourselves into, we being like the Jews of the time, and that then we should understand it in that way. Everybody's not the glittering image, right?
Yeah.
And I think of somebody like even the way I was told, the story of either hot or cold, or that being detached, the story of a rejection paired with the story of reconciliation and restoration that we find and I'm just standing at the door, I'm knocking, I'm calling out, I'm singing a ballad, wanting to come in. So I didn't really have a Valentine's Day.
You really, it was a departure from our plan.
But it is a Valentine's Day, and Jesus is the lover.
Oh, yeah, he loves you. Okay.
Jesus is the lover standing outside the door just singing.
Yeah.
Wanting to come in.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good Valentine's
and
Day.
Saying, man, if you open up the kingdom is yours.
Yeah. Good.
So that is the letter to Laodicea.
Very good. Well, I got to preach twice in the last few days. I preached on James 4, and it was great. I reread The Four Loves last week. It's a short book by C.S. Lewis, which set up kind of my thinking perfectly, because I preached on friendship with the world, which is enmity with God, according to James 4. And, friendship is one of the four loves, philia, one of the four loves in C.S. Lewis's Four Loves. And his observation was that, in the Bible in Greek rather, there are four words that when translated English often get translated as love. And it's important to explore the different dimensions of love, because I don't love my friend in the same way I love my mother, in the same way I love my wife.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's right. Let's make some boundaries here. To define the relationship clearly.
We need to do a DTR.
Yeah, exactly, a DTR.
And for the record, we include our wives in a lot more text now.
Yeah,
they get in on the fun.
It is. It's actually true. We're working on their friendship, aren't we? Yeah.
If you're listening, this is a cry for help.
Yeah, that's right. But they're probably not listening, let's be honest. We need to talk to them about that, or we'll spew them out. We'll find out if they were listening.
But we love them. That's the turn of the story.
And then for Thrive, so the young adult ministry, how would you describe that? College and career, young adult?
I think they call it young adult.
You know what? I was just saying, I was actually, a side note, I was talking to my mom. It was my grandma's official 100th birthday yesterday. So I called her, and my mom was there FaceTiming with her. And I was just saying, in a culture where marriage keeps getting pushed back, there is this stage and kind of group that finds themselves, I think, in need of a community, a gathering place for people in that age after high school, before marriage, where they can gather. And I really appreciate Thrive for that.
Thrive does a great job with that. and it's been so nice as a pastor to recommend people to Thrive, because for some reason, I have an aversion to doing singles thing and young adults things and all these special things.
It's hard to special.
So to have a group that is gathering in that way. Such a gift.
And the church, we have to set some kind of, the moment you start making a group for everyone, you start to become special interest groups and not the gathering, the ecclesia in Jesus' name. We gather in Jesus' name.
And that's why we rely on people responding to their calling. Not just what the pastor's
doesn't have to go through
the church.
Anyway, that's another conversation. So anyway, they're preaching through the 10 Commandments, and I had this festive theme of don't commit adultery, which was a great Valentine's Day theme. So I talked about the love of friendship and the love of marriage, or eros, but the love of marriage more generally. So that was great. I thought, first of all, so I want to talk a little bit about both of them, because it's helpful to talk about them together, because when you put something side by side, sometimes it helps you understand each when you compare and contrast. But first of all, just thinking about friendship with God, because in James 4, in typical James fashion, he gives kind of the negative of example. So you have to derive the positive by what not to be. And so in James 4, he's talking about the fights and quarrels that are among you, which are a result of the passions that are within you. And then he goes on to describe this as friendship with the world. So he's not talking about friendship with unbelievers. He's saying you've adopted a whole value system and a whole way of prioritizing what matters. This is what friendship with the world is. It's similar to what John calls in 1 John 2, the love of the world, which he does. Again, he's not talking about people. He defines it specifically as the desires of the flesh, the desires of the eyes, and the pride of life. And so that's the way James describes it. You want and do not have, you covet and cannot obtain, and then you pray on the basis of your coveting, and you wonder why God doesn't answer your prayers. You think God's going to give you the life that you covet? No. But then he says this is friendship with the world, and it's enmity with God, and it makes you an enemy of God. Those who are friends of the world are enemies of God. But he gives in chapter 2 the example of Abraham, who is called a friend of God. He believed in God, reckoned him as righteous, and he was called a friend of God. I think Isaiah and Ezekiel call him a friend of God. And so I just kind of re-explored this theme of friendship with God in the Bible, and it's actually really sad because God has so few friends. In fact, in the Old Testament, only 2 people are called friends of God, Abraham and Moses. It said of Moses, it says that God spoke to him face to face as a friend.
I think we could probably consider Enoch in there. Not
well,
him, but
actually, that's funny because my wife thought that too. She's like, "What about the guy who's taken up?" I was like, "Enoch? Oh yeah, no, wasn't him." But what about the guy who was taken up in a chariot? Elijah? No. So neither of them were called friends of God.
They were never called, but you're walking
together. But still, we're only explicitly told 2 people were called friends of God. And then in the Gospels, only one person is called a friend to Jesus. It was Lazarus, which is interesting if you read that into the funeral scene. Yeah.
So fascinating.
Yeah. I said in the sermon that, so what did Jesus do? He did what you would do for your friend if you were God and went to his funeral, right? You
Come on.
Bust him out of the grave.
Yeah, let's go.
Yeah.
Let's get out of here.
Get out of here. But, and so it's actually kind of sad, when you think about it. Like God has many children, many saved, very few friends. And what is a friend? A friend is someone who cares about what you care about, and this is the way C.S. Lewis will describe it, and I'll get to that in a moment. But it's important, obviously, basing it on Scripture. Jesus actually opens up friendship as the possibility of relationship with all of us, because he says to his disciples in John 10, "No longer do I call you servants, For a servant doesn't know what his master's doing, but I've made known to you everything. So I no longer call you servants. I now call you friends. So he's saying, he actually kind of similar to what C.S. Lewis says about the unique love of philia, of friendship. And that's the word Jesus uses in John 10. Jesus makes known to him all that the Father has told him. That's what he says. He makes known to him what he cares about. He makes known to them, to the disciples, everything that he cares about. He makes known to them about this kingdom of love and joy and peace and righteousness and reconciliation. And those who actually care about it become friends of God. It's just that we don't, there are many of us who just remain at that level of saved, which is the greatest thing, don't get me wrong, but we don't become friends of God until we care about what God cares about, and to the degree God cares about it. And so the whole sermon really became about caring about what God cares about, and considering all the things that we don't care about that God cares about, and do care about that God doesn't care about. And because the possibility of friendship really has been opened up to all of us. We can add to that, 3 people in the Bible who reached that level. And I also reflected on, and C.S. Lewis kind of talks about this when he talks about agape, God's love. This is perfect love, gift love. This is pure God-initiated love. But he points out, and actually translating it as charity is helpful, because he makes the kind of scandalous point that nobody wants a relationship that is purely based on a one-sided charity, right? Think about your relationship with God as based on grace, which it is, and we will never graduate from the grace of God. We're going to need it every day of our lives. But if you think about your relationship with God as a real, genuine relationship, how sad would it be that we never actually achieve any, not achieve, but move into a deeper level of mutuality with God. And because it's the example I gave was, imagine if my wife, imagine if Kelly asked me. Just
a charity case?
Yeah, exactly. Imagine if Kelly asked me, tell me all the ways, tell me all the reasons that you love me. Well, really, it's just one reason, honey. It's because I'm gracious. You don't really deserve my love. I can't really think of a good reason for it other than I'm so loving and gracious. That would be pathetic. And it's that's what we can do with that reductive way of talking about grace merely as just our forgiveness is not something we actually grow in and transforms us to a level of mutuality in our relationship with God.
It is a moment of truth in pre-marriage counseling sessions. We always start, Hannah and I usually do pre-marriage with couples together. And we start with, what's your love story? You get to hear that. And then I always follow up with, what do you love about the person? And it's always sad to me when they're still so bashful about talking about it. Yeah. And you'll see sometimes the person, the girl's looking at her husband-to-be, just wanting to hear, you're gorgeous. You are so beautiful. And the guy's like, well, they've got a great personality.
Yeah. They got a great. Don't say that, guys.
You're like, go for it. Yeah. Come on.
Yeah. I love how Lewis talks about friendship, though. He says friendship is born the moment when a man says to another, "What? You too? I thought that no one else but myself appreciates this or enjoys it." I can't remember exactly what he says. But friendship, and he makes the point, and this is actually important for how you think about Jesus saying, I no longer call you servants, but now I call you friends. The ancient world, so if you think of the Greek-speaking world, this would have been somewhat scandalous. Grace is also scandalous in a completely different way, but this would have been scandalous because it would have been regarded as the highest form of relationship. And it actually makes sense because it is the freest. It is the most non-compulsory. All the others, so storge, this is like family love. This is the love that you feel for your children is very powerful, but it's compulsory. It's also duty bound. It's also tied up with needs and so on. And then eros, obviously, it has its own whole set of characteristics we can talk about. But it has a kind of compulsion of desire that is built in. But philia, and then agape is gift love. It's God's love that Lewis points out redeems all the loves and puts them in their proper order. So, but philia is that love of mutual freedom. It is that two people. The image I used. There's a great little C.S. Lewis drawings YouTube channel, and they'll read audiobook of C.S. Lewis, and he draws it as it's kind of like the Bible project. It's really good. But his image that he drew with philia was two people pointing at stars together. And that's a perfect image for it, because it's a relationship that grows as two people, or as two or more people. Lewis actually points out that friendship is one of those relationships that grow as you add to it. It's not exclusive.
Do I have the best story to illustrate that?
Okay, well, one moment. But he says that it's a relationship that grows in a shared transcendent delight. And so you think of, two people drawn to the mountains together, or drawn to, fishing together. It's two things delighting in people. So he says it's unlike eros and even storge. Eros may be a circle of people holding hands, or storge, circle of people holding hands. Eros is face-to-face love. But friendship love, philia, is shoulder to shoulder. It's two people looking and taking delight in the world together. But here's how he describes it. And he talks about how this is actually the rarest love, not just for God, but for all of us. But he says, and why is it so rare? The first and most obvious answer is that few value it because few experience it. And the possibility of going through life without the experience is rooted in the fact which separates friendship so sharply from both the other loves. He's talking about storge and eros at this point. Friendship is, in a sense, not at all derogatory to it, the least natural of loves, the least instinctive, organic, biological, gregarious, and necessary. It has least commerce with our nerves. There's nothing throaty about it, nothing that quickens the pulse or turns you red and pale. It is essentially between individuals. The moment two men are friends, they have in some degree drawn apart together from the herd. Without eros, none of us would have been begotten, and without affection, storge, none of us would have been reared. But we can live and breed without friendship. And I just think our culture is losing this kind of love, friendship love. We've become a living and breeding and eating culture. And he says the species, biologically considered, has no need of it. The pack or herd, the community, may even dislike and distrust it. Its leaders very often do. So one of the things I talked about in the sermon is I think our cultures experience a kind of triumph of storge, of the kind of familial and familiar love that can easily become tribal, but actually is it keeps us from becoming interpersonal.
Yeah.
And I made the observation, and you could tell that a lot of people were like, oh yeah, I saw this too. Did you notice, like I noticed, that around COVID, there was a shift? For the first time in living memory for me, did I see politics begin to break up friendships. We became better ideologues and worse friends. And we stopped being able to be like perfectly honest. We started to walk around eggshells around each other. And it was this kind of this domineering, almost consuming triumph of storge, that kind of love that wants to just create a circle. Mm-hmm. And if you're not part of this circle, not interested. And so when all these loves can get disordered, and when that love gets disordered, it demands herd mentality. And as he describes friendship is when two people pull together apart from the herd, because we're rational beings. We're rational creatures. We don't have to be ideologues. We can actually see the person in one another and realize that this kind of herd mentality, herd thinking, that's for the beasts. That's not for the humans. So what's your story?
3 weeks ago, Friday night, we were driving Twilight as a family, and Elliot in the back of the truck, he goes, Dad, look at that. And I don't know what he's pointing at. He's pointing out the window, and look over, and I sent you this picture. It was this cloud formation that looked like perfectly rolling waves.
Yeah.
I've never seen anything like it.
Very cool.
It was as if God had drawn them out there. These cloud formations look like probably about 5 curls in a row and look like waves. So excited, pointed them out to me. We pulled the car over, took pictures, just delighted in it as a family. And I just kept telling him, Elliot, I love that. I love that you saw that. I love that you pointed that out to us. And because as a family, we're pointing out trees and bushes and flowers and things in nature. And so that delight erupted in his heart. But it wasn't just a delight in that. He didn't just keep it to himself, but it's something that we share as a family. And I was so happy, because that's the kind of friendship I want with my kids, that when they see something beautiful, they point it out to me. Yeah. We're not just a family that you're
not just stuck in storge.
Yeah.
It's not all affection. It's not all mutuality. It's not all face-to-face or circle. It's delighting in God's
drawn
creation.
in the same direction together by our mutual loves.
And and friendship is that love that can uniquely break into all the relationships. You can actually be friends with your wife, You can actually be friends with your kids. Now our generation tends to have a problem of only being friends sometimes. But even that is just a disordered storge, really. It's not it's more, and you'll know it because it is that over concern for the interior life. Now, you have to be concerned for the interior life, but it is the constant, concern about it's the face to face. It actually does. It's not healthy even. It gets us thinking too much about ourselves, how we're feeling constantly. That becomes our whole reality. How do I feel in a moment? But don't you realize you would feel a lot better if you actually stopped focusing on yourself a little bit and took delight at a shooting star or a sunset or the mountains or a flower?
Last night we had a couple over for their first pre-marriage counseling session, and as we were talking to them about communication, strengths and weaknesses, things that they're both bringing into the relationship. Usually the first pre-marriage counseling session, I ask them, what is something that when your fiance says it shuts you down? And then what is something when they say it opens you up? Because communication is so important in a relationship. And as they were sharing, I was kind of drawn back to this experience we had earlier in the day of driving back from my mom's place in Tahuya back home. And in the middle of that drive, I noticed what we were doing, which was our kids were in the back watching their parents as their parents chatted the whole way back. And I remember in that moment thinking, I'm so glad our kids are watching us just talk, just communicate. Yeah. And I was excited in that moment of the health in that truck. Yes. That our kids, I hope that's their model, is parents that don't just slap each other on the butt every once in a while. But we're just talking about our days.
You can slap each other butt every once in a while.
Also, this isn't an either or situation. This is a both and. But we're just talking observations, how her work's going, and the whole way is just filled with communication, and that's really
so
healthy.
Many marriages need more of this, right? More shoulder to shoulder, just delighting,
making observations to each other,
observations, projects, doing a garden together, just delighting in something other than each other. And that'll actually help you delight in each other. You just, so much of life is you're just sharing this this journey together. You're walking like Enoch, walked with God. And that's a shoulder-to-shoulder metaphor,
Yeah.
So, we need to become better friends in this culture. And there's and the characteristic of that really is freedom.
Mm-hmm.
It really is a kind of freedom from ourselves, from the self-focus, from,
one way I see this is when we host birthdays, whether it's birthdays for our family or friends, we will always have this time where we are gathered in a circle and we take turns saying what we love about that person.
Mm-hmm.
And it is telling in our culture, especially if you gather friends and you do that. And it could even be just Thanksgiving. And then this is maybe making more notice of your friendship with God. But in a circle of friends and you're saying, hey, everybody, say one thing that you love about this friend. You will notice how uncomfortable people are about vocalizing or noticing attractive qualities about someone. And that shows a poverty of phileo.
Yeah.
Is that we can't say, oh man, I'll tell you what I love about you. There's not enough time.
Yeah.
And if your heart doesn't overflow with that, take time to notice how you're developing phileo.
Even
because you know how sad it is to be on the receiving end of that. If you're the person sitting there and you're like, these are my people. I've been at bachelor parties where the same thing happens. You're going around at a bachelor party, say a blessing over this person, and there's half the people are mute. And that just shows you, oh man, let your heart overflow with affection for other people.
Yeah.
Because of the life you've shared and the things you've noticed. And because when that happens, man, you are just so filled up.
Yeah.
You're like, these people don't just like spend time with me. They notice me. They love me.
They know me.
Yeah.
They see me. Yeah. Yeah, we do that at the end of the Trek Challenge for all the kids. They'll go around. And it is interesting. Once people settle in and you get them to, they have noticed. It's just a matter of helping give a space and a language for it. Yeah.
I think of Dad Camp, which we both do, and the Rockstar Blessing, and how painful it is. I am broken when I see dads struggle to just pour out affection on their kids.
Yeah.
And it's not, we could say that's storge, but also it's this life shared together. It's so much bigger than just saying you're my son. And to watch the kids, man, when they get called up and their life is hanging in the balance of that moment. What is my dad seeing me, And we get the opportunity daily with our friends, literally to just be the guy who's like, man, I love this about you. Whoa, that's so cool. This is awesome. Let's do this. We wait to be called out. So.
I remember hearing, now take it with a grain of salt because Robert Bly is not a Christian, but a wonderful poet and kind of speaks to the resonances of the soul. But I remember him saying something like, the mother defines the spirit of the family, and the father, or shapes the spirit of the family, and the father defines the word of the family. So the father's word becomes identity. The mother's spirit becomes identity for who we are. And I remember thinking, I don't know biblically, but there's something true to that.
Experientially.
And think of blessing and curse and
I remember experientially when my dad and mom were sitting there as I started forming as a preacher, and if my mom was like pouring out words on me, I'd be like, of course you're my mom. Yeah. But if my dad would say a word to me, it meant the world to me. Dude,
how many sons are waiting for their father's blessing? Yeah. Read the story of Jacob. I mean, that whole story is a story about a life longing for the father's blessing. Yeah. And getting a kind of curse from his father. But we'll have to talk about that sometime.
There's a collection of essays by David Siebold called Fathers and Sons. Okay. I think out of print, but worth buying. And each is I think they're all journalists who are writing stories about their relationships with their dad. Wow. And one of them, I've told you this little snapshot at the very end of the story. He says something like, and there my dad was like a suit of armor toppled over with crows flying out of it.
Wow.
And it was just this image of like he was exactly what I always thought he was.
A shell of a man.
Yep.
Yeah. Wow.
And I think a lot of sons feel that way because their dads aren't opening their mouth to say, I delight in you. Yeah. And I don't just delight in who you are, I delight in what we do together.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll have to do a whole podcast on
Dad's Day's coming up.
Blessing. Yeah, that's right. I'll jump in real quick with, well, maybe not real quick, but with marriage. So don't commit adultery. Because I'm actually interested in your take on this. I got in a debate with my father-in-law once. Yeah. And I mean, and I respect him, look up to him. He's formed so much of who I am. But we were in a debate about divorce and remarriage and all of that. And first of all, I should just say, God can redeem the unredeemable, the irredeemable. And I think of like my uncle was a second marriage for my aunt, and it was a marriage that, well, it's not important why it ended, but it was, if you take my position too strictly and you don't allow any room for grace, it can shut the door in ways that God doesn't, I think. But you have to begin with Jesus' words. And so here was the debate. It is in the discussion of remarrying a couple that has been divorced without the criteria for divorce that Jesus gives, which is adultery. In the case of adultery, you can divorce. And I would extrapolate and just say, in the case of abuse, you can divorce. I don't think it was necessary to say that in the first century, because for Jews in the first century, only the husband could divorce the wife. It is the case that Roman citizens, women could divorce their husband, but Jesus actually makes this qualification about husbands divorcing wives and wives divorcing husbands, only in the case of adultery. So the question is this: can you remarry them if they've been divorced and it hasn't met those qualifications that Jesus gave for divorce?
To different spouses, is what you're saying.
Yeah, to different spouses, sorry, yeah. And so here's what Jesus says. He says that whoever divorces his wife and marries another commits adultery against her. And if she divorces her husband and marries another, she commits adultery. And so the debate was, he was saying, well, you have to determine whether divorce is a sin or a state. A sin or like a state would be. And I said, well, based on what Jesus says, I would call it both. Because I don't know how you make sense of the logic of what he's saying without that. Because he doesn't say that whoever divorces his wife and then marries another has sinned, and that she marries another, she's sinned. He says that he makes her an adulterer, which means this: what we recognize as divorce, he doesn't. He's not saying that there's a problem here, you got a divorce. He's saying you're committing adultery by remarrying. Okay? And this goes back to the definition of what is marriage. And we have a very naturalistic way of understanding marriage. In the biblical vision from Genesis 2 through the New Testament, marriage is both a sacrament and a covenant. Sacrament and a covenant. It's a sacrament, and you can understand a sacrament as a kind of intersection between heaven and earth. In that, these are institutions that God initiates, because, like, how do we how can we presume upon God's presence? God's infinite, God's everywhere. Mm-hmm. How do we know that we're actually entering into God's presence? Well, we can respond to what he has invited us into. There's 3 that should be universally recognized, probably 4, the church being the 4th, but also in a way the first. But the others that we recognize are baptism. Go baptize, I'll be with you to the end of the day. Go and baptize, mm-hmm. and I'll meet you in the water. Mm-hmm. God's there mm-hmm. with us when we baptize. Communion, this is my body. As often you do it, do it in remembrance of me. The blood, the bread and the cup, this is participation, koinonia, in the mm-hmm. body of Christ, 1 Corinthians. So these 2 we recognize these as sacraments. We know that Christ's presence is really there in baptism. It's really there in communion. But also in marriage, because he said from the very beginning, this is the original sacrament. In fact, a man shall leave his father and mother. This is Genesis 2, and Jesus quotes it, Mark 10 and elsewhere. A man shall leave his father and mother, and some translations say hold fast. It should not be translated in the active. However, whatever word you mm-hmm. use, it is a passive. It is be held together or mm-hmm. be joined to the wife, because it's something God is doing. Mm-hmm. What God has joined together, let no man separate. God's joining it makes it a sacrament. Jesus commanding, let no man separate it, makes it a covenant. And that means in every marriage, and the way I brought this up was pointed out that the origin story of Valentine's Day is that Claudius II, the emperor, mm-hmm. had banned marriages for soldiers during his reign because it made them soft and distracted. Because marriage does kind of make you soft and distracted, doesn't mm-hmm. it? But there were a few priests who resisted that command because they didn't believe in state-sanctioned marriage. The state had no business involving itself in Christian marriage. And so Valentinus, St. Valentine of Rome, continued to do marriages. He got busted and he got beheaded on February 14th, 269 AD.
Yeah. Which just seems like overkill.
It does seem like overkill a little bit. But that's the legend, the history, it's somewhere between the two of where Valentine's Day began. But the point I want to make here, and as it relates to all this, and then I want to get your thoughts, is first of all, if the state outlaws marriage, well, how can you get married? Well, it doesn't matter what the state says. Marriage is not a government contract. It's not authorized and ratified by a government contract. Mm-hmm. It is authorized and ratified and realized by the living God. He's the one who, and this is, by the way, Keldy and I had our wedding ceremony before God in Canada, July 7th, 2007. Went on our honeymoon, and then was only officially married mm-hmm. in terms of the state in the U.S. like a week later. And I remember I think her family members, or it was either one of her friends or family members, was basically saying you're living in sin, mm-hmm. going on your honeymoon before. It's like, well, what do you regard as the real marriage? Is it the word pronounced in accord with God's word?
Yeah.
Or is it this state contract? Because if it's the state contract, then you end up with the view of marriage that we have in our culture, a marriage of the people, by the people, for the people. Mm-hmm. And it's no wonder that, we signed our right away to define marriage the moment we required a government signature on a religious covenant. The state has no business being involved in Christian marriage. Mm-hmm. It has really nothing to do with Christian marriage. Mm-hmm. And so marriage is a sacrament and a covenant. And it's on that basis then, therefore, that Jesus will say that when you divorce each other under the terms of some, state contract, the state might recognize it, but God doesn't. So when you get remarried, you become an adulterer. Mm-hmm. So how then, as a pastor, I'll ask you, mm-hmm. how do you parse this out based on Jesus' words, when a couple comes to you and they have, let's say they've both come from no-fault divorce situations and they want to get married. How do you deal with that?
Couple things. Thankfully, I haven't had to deal with that yet. I do think it's helpful understanding the context Jesus was responding to in that. And we recently went through the Sermon on the Mount. I know this is dealt with in a few different spots, but in the Sermon on the Mount, the context really, because you do wonder in the scope of these 7 different examples he uses interacting with the law. This one seems a little out of the blue. But there was a huge cultural debate between 2 different Jewish schools at the time. One supporting what we would call no-fault divorce, and that's really what it was. That a husband could, the example used back then was like a husband could say, you got the tea too hot, and so I'm just divorcing wives because of that.
Especially Roman citizens had like possessive rights over their wives.
Yeah. Jesus
familia.
was dealing with Jewish schools.
Yeah, but some Jews were Roman citizens, like Paul, for example.
Yeah, but religiously, this was
right.
The school of Shammai and Hillel, and Jesus is outright rejecting the school of Hillel, who was saying, really, for any reason you can.
Which shows the assimilation that you have in their diaspora culture, that the world around is impressing its values onto the religious community, and they're adopting those values by a kind of state defined order of institutions.
And so we should have the humility to recognize that can happen to us too, that we can assimilate this idea of no-fault divorce and act as if it doesn't matter, really. I mean, that's what we'd be saying. Hey, you kind of do what you want, and then you can have anything available to you that the church has to offer, and that is not the case. And so I think the place to start when we talk about marriage, when we talk about homosexuality, with anything that is so emotionally charged, is having the humility to come back to the proper perspective going into any of these conversations is that that what God says goes, and that is more important than how I feel. Because when you're coming into something like, well, I am talking about homosexuality, everything, the person who is struggling with same-sex attraction is going to be like, everything in me is saying yes to that. In the terms of remarriage, if you have been divorced in this sort of no-fault divorce culture, and then you fall in love, and you're like, everything in me is wanting that. You do need to start not just by saying, what does your heart want, but what does the Bible say?
What does God want?
Yeah. What does God say is true, and let every man be a liar. Right? And so I think that's just a sobering place to start any conversation, especially one that's so emotionally charged. I think if you take what we'd call the black and white reading of it is, and the seriousness of it, that it is the two will become one flesh. And that's not an exaggeration or hyperbole. This, in the eyes of God, is what's happening.
Yes.
To glory in that and really see what's happening there.
And I would actually say this is one of those, it's actually pretty black and white. And it doesn't seem like an embellishment. It seems like a clear line of logic that flows from the two become one flesh. And
here's a question with it. Do you think it matters if the person was not saved when they got married? The first, say, like, I was crazy back then. I was 21, not following God, and I'm a different person today. I'm just throwing out some hypotheticals versus, the person you meet that are like, we're believers. We just fell out of love.
Yeah. I don't think it matters because, for a couple of reasons. One is, marriage wasn't unique to Jewish culture. There's forms of marriage all over. And what as, similar to the idea of the tract for the times, Genesis 1-11, God's actually imbuing these institutions with their true and proper meaning to say that whoever did the marriage, here's what God was doing in it. And the marriage becomes really ratified when it's consummated. Sex itself becomes the sealing act that defines the marriage. And what the implications are is that sex is a spiritual union. And in a way, and that's why, and you think about it practically, anyone who has had sexual partners prior to marriage, guilty, there's a union that happens, and that it's spiritual. And this is why, rape, for example, is so devastating. Not to make light of the situation, but I have chickens, and the only way they breed is by rape. I mean, these roosters are ruthless. In fact, the first time I saw it, I beheaded my rooster because Kelty'd been wanting me to for a long time, so we could just get rid of it because it was loud, and she was like, we'll eat it, but I'm a softie and I don't like killing things. When I saw it biting the necks of my hens, that very day I went out there, cut its head off, and we ate it. But rape is the way of, the beast of this world in a way. But it is absolutely catastrophic for human beings because it's spiritual. There's a real union that happens. And so sex is a very, very sacred act, obviously. And so I don't think you can separate I wasn't a believer. And Paul doesn't treat it like that. Paul doesn't say if you're married to an unbeliever, just get a divorce because that doesn't count. He's saying, no, stay with them and try to get them saved, essentially. So the way I think about it is when Jesus says, he doesn't actually say when they, if she divorced her husband or he divorced her, they marry another, or that they can't marry another. He just says they commit adultery. I would just say, in the case of a remarriage, let Jesus call it what it is. This is adultery.
And
but with that to say, in his utter, I was talking with the guys at Thrive last night, and we were dealing with this a little bit, and I can't remember who said it, but the quote is something like, we have to give sin enough dignity that we name it properly. If we start changing the definitions and we try to distance ourselves from the plain words of Scripture, that is a slippery slope of compromise. Let's just call it what it is. No, there are redeemed marriages that are born of adultery. And I would consider but my aunt and uncle, second marriage, he became like a father to me, my Uncle Eddie. I have no doubt that they both know Christ, love Christ. The whole family's been redeemed, and God works with us in he picks us up wherever we're willing to turn our lives over to him. And but it's a form of accommodation. And actually even that's precisely the logic of divorce that Jesus gives in Matthew 18, accommodation. And this is Calvin's word. Calvin describes this in his commentary on Matthew 18, where Jesus says, I think he might say it here in Mark 10 as well, Moses only allowed you to write a certificate of divorce because of your hardness of hearts, which means that God's holy standard, according to his law, was lower than his highest standard. The law itself was an accommodation to a sinful world. But Jesus says it was not so from the beginning. You want to know what my perfect standard was? The two become one flesh, and this is permanent. This is, you can't break that. Whatever the state might say, even if you might declare divorce, I'm saying you're united forever. And then practically, in just a practical level, any divorced family, especially when there's kids involved, it's a forever relationship. Even if it's a relationship defined by abandonment, hostility, you're forever united in that connection, right?
If you want to know and grasp the seriousness of marriage, just go watch the first half hour of Braveheart.
Oh yeah, true.
When William Wallace gets married, and then prima nocta, and when his wife is killed, and the rampage he goes on. I watched that with my wife, and we were like, "Get him!"
Yeah. Oh
You're
yeah.
like, you burn it all down.
Burn the world down, brother.
Down.
Yeah. I know.
Yeah. So if you want to see how serious God takes marriage, it's more serious than William Wallace.
Not that William Wallace is God, but yeah. Well, Malachi 2.
Well,
Malachi 2, actually, that is the language. He condemns the men of that generation, and it's one of the few times he says he hates something. For I hate divorce, he says. And what he said, because of the spirit, I actually have it here. I want to read it, actually, and then we'll start wrapping this up. But he actually says, Malachi 2, he says, because the Lord was witness between you and the wife of your youth, to whom you have been faithless, though she is your companion and your wife by covenant, did he not make them one with a portion of the Spirit, his Spirit in their union? Again, this is what makes it a sacrament. God's own Spirit unites our spirit. That's why we call it the union of marriage. God takes our spirit, your spirit. It's Trinitarian in that sense. And then he says, and what was it that God was seeking from it? Godly offspring. Again, this goes back to the original vision. He blessed them, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it. The whole family picture, motion picture of God's image is contained in this family vision. Godly offspring. So guard yourselves in your spirit, and let none of you be faithless to the wife of your youth, for I hate divorce. So what do we take away from it? One, God, yes, redeem situation, but let's not change God's language. Let's just stick to it and just recognize I may be an adulterer. And by the way, according to Matthew 5, you probably are. And I am too. Because whoever lusts after another woman's wife has committed adultery in his heart. So, but I may be an adulterer, and thank God there's grace for it. But let's stop being unwilling to keep the standard where Jesus kept it, because what we're doing is we're setting up young couples to get divorced in the future. And whenever you do premarital counseling, me too, I just say, divorce, you got to get that out of your vocabulary. You got to it can't even be on the table. And this business of irreconcilable differences, no fault divorce, that is blasphemy. It's antichrist. I mean, because what is this? The other point about sacraments is every sacrament is intended to be a word picture of the gospel. The baptism, dying and rising, it's a word picture of Christ's death and resurrection. The bread and the juice, my body, which is broken for you, my blood was shed for you. The difference in marriage is it's not ceremonially symbolic, it is incarnationally symbolic. Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church, which means this is actually we only become a word picture to the degree we allow Jesus be the Lord of our marriages, to be the Lord of our lives, and actually love one another, so that as we embody his love, my wife will experience more than just my love. I become sacramentally a vessel to her, and she to me.
Yeah, and so we should be asking ourselves, how does Jesus see this situation? How does Jesus see this?
Absolutely.
Not just how do I see it or feel about it?
Yeah.
And
how do I make myself feel better about all these, this mess of a situation that we find our culture in? Offerings.
Offerings.
Okay. I'll start because it's one of my favorite C.S. Lewis quotes, but it's toward the end of the book where he's talking about agape love, charity, and he references St. Augustine talking about one of his friends that died, and Augustine is trying to make this argument for detachments, and there's something to be said about the quote asceticism of detachment. It's like in John's way of talking about detachment. Don't love the things of the world. Don't love the world or the things of the world, for the world is passing away along with its desires. So Augustine is talking about it in that sense. We can't be too attached to people because they're passing away. So only attach yourself to the eternal, to God. And Lewis actually pushes back against that and makes the point that, no, you're not supposed to attach yourself to things, but to people. We're supposed to love them. And that is by nature.
And if I can just say, Augustine didn't have the best attachments.
Yeah, well, I have a mixed relationship with
he's not the best example when it comes to women. And
with women, yeah, but he's one of the masters. But I think he gets relationships at this level wrong, at this fundamental level.
We'll say autobiographically.
Okay. Yeah.
Not the gold standard.
Not the gold. Jesus is the gold standard. Thank you very much. Okay, but this is what he says. He pushes back against it, and he says, he's basically saying, this is a kind of pagan philosophy. Mm-hmm. This is more of a Stoicism view of human relationships. And he says, there is no safe investment when it comes to love. To love at all is to be vulnerable. Love anything, and your heart will certainly be wrung and possibly be broken. If you want to make sure of keeping it intact, you must give your heart to no one, not even to an animal. Wrap it carefully round with hobbies and little luxuries. Avoid all entanglements. Lock it up safe in the casket or coffin of your selfishness. But in that casket, safe, dark, motionless, airless, it will change. It will not be broken. It will become unbreakable, impenetrable, irredeemable. The alternative to tragedy, or at least to the risk of tragedy, is damnation. The only place outside of heaven where you can be perfectly safe from all the dangers and perturbations of love is hell.
I love that quote.
It's good, isn't it?
Yep. I've used it several times.
Have you really?
in sermons.
Good.
The offerings I bring this
offerings plural?
No,
Okay.
Just one.
Yeah.
One offering I bring this week, I'll keep it short, is revisiting another master, not Augustine, but Jane Austen. So the end of last week, I said, Hannah, let's one of our favorite stay-at-home date night things to do is we get a bottle of rosé and we get those little frozen chocolate-covered strawberries, and we play a game or watch a movie. So I said, let's get some wine, let's watch a rom-com together, which I know when you and your wife do that, you fall asleep. So
I do.
So Hannah said, she goes, I want to
rosé.
watch Persuasions again, the 2022 version, which is awesome and very accurate to the book. So we watched it, and it just made me curious again. So I've read the book again over the weekend. And so Persuasions was released posthumously. Last novel that she wrote, Jane Austen passed away at the age of 41. And has this interesting, complex story herself where she was the daughter of a pastor and was engaged once, broke off the engagement. I think maybe it was even in like the course of she accepted it at night and then the next morning broke it off. But she often writes about society. Persuasions is this beautiful book, my favorite of all Austen's writings. And it's really a story of redemption where an engagement that is broken off, you see this inner angst as both want nothing more than to see this relationship restored. And the book is the working out of what internally is keeping them from that until the end, when they're finally able to actually communicate it in words. And if you've read the book, the way they communicate is very beautiful. But I think why Jane Austen has become so timeless for us. I mean, for hundreds of years, she's now been, or I should say, well over 100 years, has been kind of the master of romance, is because she lets us inside what's happening in people and the angst of it.
Like the T.S. Eliot of romance. Novels.
Of romance. And
sorry, I mean Leo Tolstoy.
Okay, Leo Tolstoy.
I'm not thinking. Yeah, Tolstoy.
So highly recommend Persuasions. It's a delightful read, and the 2022 version of it is actually a great take on it. The videography is awesome, and watch it as it is, which is a story of redemption. That two people that finally recognize their unworthiness of the other, and because of that are unwilling to say anything about it. And finally, when they say it, they recognize themselves in the other. So very, very beautiful, and recommend it. Persuasions by Jane Austen.
All right. You're not going to read any quotes from it?
I won't read any quotes from it. I mean, there's a number I could choose from, but
very good.
But I will say, so there's actually a quote that is powerful, which is "Time will explain," and it's used in the book. And we say oftentimes time will heal all wounds. But I think what she points out in that is that time won't. It does require at some point us saying something. And I think the book actually calls us out, that we kind of do expect that an outcome, good or bad, will just be inevitable. And so I think the book is all leading to say something.
Nice. Yeah.
And in relationships, we need to. Yeah. We need to finally say the words that need to be spoken. So.
Good. And if you want to read an article on the very opposite of love, I just published today a post on Substack called 50 Shades of Hell. The subtitle is "When Sex Becomes Sexuality, Communion Becomes Consumerism." And so it's basically an analysis of a pornographic culture, written kind of in light of the release. I wrote it originally for Seedbed Publishing about the release of the movie 50 Shades of Grey, which I did not go and see, and I talk about. There are some books you can judge just by the cover, but it talks about love in all its opposite forms, which is consumerism, and it's that Galatians 5, take care not to bite and devour one another, lest you consume one another. It's the very opposite of love, which sees the other as just an object for my gratification, as an extension of my own all-consuming ego. And I think our culture really is nurturing that in each of us. So anyway,
so two more advertisements.
Okay.
Tomorrow night is Ash Wednesday.
A little self-promo.
A little self-promo. Yeah. Tomorrow night's Ash Wednesday, 6:30 p.m. at the Refuge Church.
At the Refuge this year.
Yep. Crossroads and Refuge will be gathering. Join us for that. And it will be a prelude to then the next ad, which is Refuge and Crossroads will both be in a new sermon series starting Sunday called Hunger for God.
Hunger for God.
And so next week will be, I think, the first week of a published podcast that we're going to be dealing with
together. That'll be fun. Maybe
content.
It'll be shorter.
Lord willing.
So if you are wretched, pitiable, poor, naked, and blind, but hungry, you should enjoy this series.
Yes. So if you've been enjoying, subscribe.
Smash that like button.
Smash that like button.
Share with a friend. It really helps.
Because this is the place where we preach gospel, plant sequoias, and practice resurrection.